You ever stop and think about the money in your pocket or, the numbers in your bank account? Where does that system even come from? Well, you might be surprised to hear it wasn't dreamed up in some quiet boardroom. Nope. It was actually forged in this epic high-stakes duel between two absolute geniuses, a real battle of wits that literally shaped the future of money as we know it. So let's get right into it. Okay, so picture this. It's 1944. The world is still deep in the chaos of World War II. But while bombs are falling, a completely different kind of battle is taking place. In this remote, kind of fancy hotel in New Hampshire, delegates from 44 different countries have gathered. And their mission? It's huge. They're trying to build a whole new global economic system from the literal ashes of war and the Great Depression. I mean, the stakes, you couldn't get any higher. But to really get why they were all crammed into this hotel, we've got to jump back a bit. You have to understand, the world they were trying to put back together, it was an absolute wreck. It was shattered by the total economic chaos of the 1930s. And this quote right here, from the guy running the conference, Henry Morgenthau, it just nails it. See, for the leaders back then, the Great Depression wasn't just some big economic oopsie. No, they believed that all the currency wars and trade barriers, that stuff was a direct line to World War II. They saw this economic aggression as the first shot in a real war. And what's just wild is how fast it all fell apart. It was like a set of dominoes. They tried to patch up the old gold standard after World War I, but it was shaky. Then, boom, 1929, Wall Street crashes, and that kicks off a total collapse. The real kicker was in 31, when Britain, the financial center of the world, was forced to ditch the gold standard. After that, the whole system just imploded. The next decade was just pure economic chaos. Every country for itself, currency wars, trade just grinding to a halt. The old way of doing things was dead. They needed something new, something radical, and they needed it fast. And this is where our two main characters enter the story. Two incredibly smart guys, but they could not have been more different. And each of them had a totally competing vision, a completely different blueprint for how the new world should work. So in one corner, you've got John Maynard Keynes. The guy was a rock star economist, a Cambridge-educated aristocrat, literally the most famous intellectual on the planet. But here's the catch. He's fighting for Great Britain, a nation that's completely broke from the war. And in the other corner, Harry Dexter White, a total nobody, a quiet bureaucrat from the U.S. Treasury, the son of immigrants. But, and this is a huge but, he's representing the United States, the world's brand new financial superpower, the country with all the cash. And yeah, their plans were about as opposite as you can get. You have to understand, for Keynes, this wasn't some academic debate. He was literally fighting to save his country from ruin. When he called it a financial Dunkirk, he wasn't being dramatic. He meant it. The British Empire, this global power, had basically emptied its bank account to fight the war and was now massively in debt to the Americans. So Keynes's big idea was, well, it was beautiful, really. It was super idealistic. He wanted a truly global system. He even came up with a new world currency. He called it the Bancor, that wouldn't belong to any one country. And his system was designed to keep things balanced, to make sure countries with huge surpluses and countries with huge debts both had to adjust. It was all about cooperation, a level playing field, to make sure the disasters of the 30s never happened again. And then there was Harry Dexter White's plan. It was the complete opposite. Forget idealism. This was all about power. It was practical, it was nationalistic, and honestly, it was pretty ruthless. White looked at the situation, saw that America had all the money and all the gold, and he designed a system that pressed that advantage hard. His vision put the US dollar right at the center of the universe, backed by all that American gold. This wasn't about a level playing field. This was about making sure America was the one calling the shots. So there you have it. Two men, two totally opposing plans. The stage was set for an epic showdown. And that showdown was going to happen at Bretton Woods in the summer of 1944. And look, let's be real. Even though there were 44 countries there, this whole conference was basically a duel, a two-man show. The real deals, the arm-twisting, the high-stakes negotiations, that was all happening between Keynes and White. Everyone else, they were pretty much just watching from the sidelines. Because underneath all the talk about exchange rates and gold, something much, much bigger was going on. This was the moment, the exact moment, that global power officially shifted. The torch was being passed from the old, fading British Empire to the new, rising American superpower. America had the money. America was funding the war. All the economic jargon? That was just the official paperwork confirming who was now in charge of the world. And when it came down to it, it wasn't even a fair fight. Keynes might have been the more brilliant debater, the intellectual heavyweight, but Harry Dexter White had something way more powerful, a giant pile of gold. He basically used America's financial might like a weapon, just systematically hammering away at Keynes' plan until his own dollar-focused vision was the only thing left on the table. All right, so White won. But what did this new system he created actually look like? How did it all work? Let's break it down. Okay, the system that came out of this, the Bretton Woods System, was actually pretty simple and for its time, kind of brilliant. Here's how it worked. Step 1. The US dollar was locked to gold at a set price, $35 an ounce. Rock solid. Step 2, every other important currency in the world was then locked to the US dollar. And step 3, they created 2 new global institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, to basically be the referees and make sure nobody cheated. Simple as that. And the result of all this was crystal clear. The US dollar was now king, the undisputed champion of global finance. It became the anchor for the entire world's economy. And this deal kicked off decades of American economic dominance. But the story doesn't end there. Not by a long shot. Because it turns out the guy who masterminded this whole thing, the architect of the dollar's reign, Harry Dexter White, well, he was hiding a secret, a really big one. An absolutely mind-blowing secret that nobody would find out about until years after he was dead. And that leads us to the most shocking question in this whole saga. The man who basically built the platform for American financial power, whose side was he really on? Get this, just a few years after his big win at Bretton Woods, White gets hauled in front of Congress. And the accusation is insane. They accuse him of being a Soviet spy. People started coming forward, claiming he was part of this secret spy ring in Washington, feeding top-secret documents straight to Moscow. There was even a story about him getting a fancy rug as a thank you gift from the Soviets. Now, White denied everything, fiercely. But just 3 days after he testified, he died of a heart attack. For decades, the story just kind of ended there, a mystery. But then, years later, historians found his private, unpublished papers, and what they found was a bombshell. This quote, "The man who was building the very architecture of global capitalism was secretly writing that the Soviet Union's socialist experiment has worked." I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's just a stunning twist. So what are we supposed to think about that? The guy who designed the American century was, at the very least, a huge admirer of America's #1 enemy. And at worst, he was an actual spy. It is one of the biggest, most unbelievable ironies in all of modern history. And to this day, nobody really knows what his true motivations were. And that brings us right back to today. Because the world that Harry Dexter White built, this world centered on the US dollar, it's still kind of here. It survived the Cold War. It survived all of it. But now, you've got new players on the field. Economic giants like China are starting to challenge that old order. And it makes you wonder, are we slowly marching towards another massive global showdown? A new Bretton Woods for the 21st century to fight it all out and decide the future of money all over again?